Hello everyone. So this video concludes the lesson on macromolecules. So we're going to finish off by talking about nucleic acids, the last of the four macromolecules. So the first thing I want to talk about are the functions of nucleic acids. So nucleic acids are important because they carry our genetic information, and you might know that as DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. And it's also essential for helping us make proteins. So in order for us to make proteins, we actually need to go into our DNA, read our DNA, and then copy that into RNA. And from there, we can make protein. So it goes from DNA, RNA to protein. So RNA is really important for us in terms of making protein. Okay, so let's talk about the monomer of nucleic acids, which would be nucleotides. So nucleotides are made up of three major components. We have what's called the base and the sugar group, and the last thing is the phosphate group. So the nitrogenous base is often abbreviated by using the first letter of the base's name, and you might be familiar if you've taken biology before as that being A, T, C, and G. So A stands for adenine, T stands for thymine, C stands for cytosine, and G stands for guanine. So these four bases are important because they help determine our genetic information. And the important parts of the sugar and the phosphate is that these two actually make up the backbone of DNA. So DNA is made up of nucleotides, and those nucleotides are in the form of a base plus a phosphate group plus a sugar group. The nitrogenous bases are important because they help determine our genetic information, and how they bind depends on the nitrogenous base. So if you looked at this model right here, what this is showing is how bases bind to each other. So adenine will always bind to thymine, guanine will always bind to cytosine, and that's what this is showing here. Alright, so now let's look at the differences between the types of nucleic acids. So there are two types of nucleic acids. It's going to be DNA and RNA. So I want you to take a moment and stop the video and write down the differences between DNA and RNA, and then you can resume the video and we'll compare notes. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to do that and write down the differences. So one of the biggest differences between RNA and DNA is that RNA contains the base called uracil, and it does not contain the base thymine. So DNA contains thymine and RNA contains uracil. Another major difference between DNA and RNA is that DNA is double-stranded, and it forms a double helix, but RNA is single-stranded and it can't form a double helix. And the other difference between DNA is that DNA contains the sugar called deoxyribose, and RNA contains a sugar called ribose. Alright, so now that we have those differences down, one of the things that's really important to highlight in DNA is that it contains what's called directionality. So directionality means that the way that this molecule is made is in one direction. And it's going to be made from 5' to 3'. So it would always be made from 5 to 3. Okay, and this directionality is an important concept to note from DNA, as well as RNA, because RNA is also made from 5 to the 3'. Okay, so this wraps up our lesson on macromolecules, and these four macromolecules seen together will fall on the hierarchy of life right under the molecule. Because if you remember, the hierarchy of life going from atoms to biomes, okay, where does the macromolecules fit? Well, it's still considered to be part of the molecule, even though it's a much bigger molecule. So let's just kind of zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture of these macromolecules. So the next part on the hierarchy of life is the organelle. So if we take these macromolecules, we find that they are the major components of these organelles. So right now you should be also reading the cell reading in your textbook, and you might be able to identify all of these structures that is shown here. If you can do that, then that's great. But these organelles are essential for making up the cell. So why do we have these macromolecules? Well, these macromolecules are the building blocks of our cells. They are the building blocks of organelles, and the organelles help make up our own cells. And so this is just a cartoon showing these organelles that make up the cell, but if we take these cells and we actually look at maybe something that looks like this, many cells. So this is a micrograph of human tissue cultured cells. These are human cells that are stained for particular structures inside the cell. But these cells help make up the tissues, and the tissues will help make up the organs, and eventually the organ system, and then eventually this makes up us. So the big picture of macromolecules is that they are the essential building blocks for the smaller building blocks that make up our cells. So in order for us to be able to function, we need these macromolecules. They're absolutely essential. So that wraps up the lesson on macromolecules, and I hope that was helpful. And keep studying. All right, good. I'm done. I'm done. Done.